Every year, millions of people from around the world visit our nation's capital. Its majestic landmarks are home to the very halls where democracy takes shape. But there's a hidden history here, especially on Pennsylvania Avenue.
I wake up every morning in a house that was built by slaves.
In 2016, former First Lady Michelle Obama called attention to that history during a speech at the DNC, sparking a firestorm online.
A lot of people were surprised by that because they don't really know much about the history of slavery in this country. And they don't like to think about these harder, darker, more difficult aspects of American history.
Mrs. Obama's simple statement exposed a complex truth that's often overlooked, that the White House stands tall in part due to the unpaid labor of enslaved people who are involved in every aspect of its construction. Her comment inspired an ambitious question that for America's 250th anniversary, we set out to answer. Could we find the living descendants of the enslaved people who built the White House, an endeavor that's never been accomplished before? Our journey begins in Boston, at the headquarters of American Ancestors, one of the country's largest genealogical organizations. There we challenge researchers from the 10 Million Names Project to collaborate on what would become a first-of-its-kind genealogical breakthrough.
This is needle in a haystack stuff. You're looking for little property records, you're looking for birth records in churches, deeds, and bills of sale, anything with someone's name on it. But those are scattered all over the place. They're not all collected into a central resource.
For Black Americans, it's a little bit more difficult to do this type of work because of the period of enslavement.
The first census that records Black Americans is the 1870 census, because before that, enslaved Americans were only recorded as property, alongside the cattle and the pigs. They weren't documented as human beings with their own full lives.
Over 2 years of painstaking work, the researchers went through hundreds of records across several states, looking for names of the enslaved and attempting to piece together a family tree that would connect the past with the present.
I didn't necessarily think that we could find living descendants, but you never really know if something's possible until you look.
There were false hopes and dead ends.
The whole team worked on it, which is like 20 plus genealogists. And then once we had a good sense of the best candidates to bring forward, there were 4 or 5 of us that slogged away at that for 2 years, really, before we found Ashley.
Ashley Swain, neuroscience PhD and mother of 3, a potential living descendant.
There was a lot of ups and downs here. Finding Ashley, it was like a celebration when we finally figured it out, because it was a lot of work.
But first, her identity had to be confirmed.
Hi, Ashley?
Hi, yes. Okay.
To ensure that the information we had was accurate.
We believe that your ancestor made some very important contributions to our country. So I just have a few questions for you.
Okay.
Okay. So is your mom Jackie Smith?
Yes, Jacqueline, yep, Smith. Yep.
Okay. And then her father is Robert Smith?
Yes.
Okay. And did he die in 2005?
That's about right, yep.
Okay. I'm talking to the right person. That's really great news.
After that cliffhanger, Ashley was eager to learn more.
Okay, so I'm beginning my packing.
So we invited her to Washington, D.C., and she wanted her mother, Jackie, by her side.
When he trained to Washington, D.C.
So very excited. Seems surreal. I wonder what they're gonna say. I wonder who it is. The suspense is like killing me. Here we go.
Their destination? The oldest private residence in D.C., the Octagon Museum. And after a busy morning of travel, it was finally time to reveal our incredible discovery.
Hello. You're looking good. All right, you must be Ashley. You both look great. Welcome to DC. You made it in from Philly.
Yes.
You came in from the ATL.
I did, yeah.
Oh, okay. Now, how far back do you know your family history? What generation do you go back to that you can remember?
Grandfather passed before I was born. Grandmom died just before I was born.
And that knowledge passed away with them?
Yep.
So we're going to go in the dining room. We have some people that are waiting there that are going to help you unravel your family history. You ready?
Yes.
You ready?
I am excited.
Come on. Wow, wow, wow.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, Ashley.
Lindsay and her fabulous team, they have uncovered some incredible information about one of your ancestors that is truly first of its kind. And so before we get to that, just hearing that, what's going through your mind?
I just said, oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah. I think for me, it's just excitement, nervousness, you know, all the things. It's just like, how did I get here?
Lindsay, the table is yours.
So I'm going to just share with you, if we all can just pass these down. What we want to do is make connections between each individual. So you'll see Ashley, you're on the bottom here, and then Jackie, your grandfather, Ashley, and your father, Robert Smith. This generation, James Peter Smith and Beatrice Marie Hicks. This is your first great-grandparents. Your second great-grandparents are James Hicks and Fanny Rome. Your third great-grandparents are William Hicks and Sarah E. Ambush. They're from Washington, D.C. And then your fourth great-grandfather and grandmother are Calvert Ambush and Patsy Cried.
At the top, we see Calvert Ambush. Can you please tell us the significance of this gentleman in American history?
Your fourth great-grandfather, Calvert Ambush, was one of the enslaved men who built the White House. One of the most iconic landmarks in America.
Really? Oh, my goodness.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, my goodness.
Your great-great-great-grandfather helped build
The White House.
the White House.
Wow. And a little teary-eyed.
To know that you have an ancestor that has such a significant role in our country's history.
Yes.
Calvert Ambush, a name reclaimed, an ancestral family connection restored.
And Lindsay, how were you able to determine this? How do you go about with enslaved individuals to get the information?
We know that Calvert was one of the people who built the White House from this payroll record.
Is this a first for a genealogical organization to be able to link a living descendant to an enslaved individual like this who worked on the White House?
Yes, this is the first time we've been able to make the connection. It's incredible that the two of you are sitting here with me. I've been looking for you for 2 years.
Vince, I want to bring you in on the conversation here. Just give us the historical context.
We know the original White House begun construction in 1792, but then, after the White House was burned in 1814, in 1829, President Andrew Jackson had the North Portico built. And that's where we find Calvert Ambush employed.
Oh, my goodness.
And the North Portico, that is the iconic shot of the White House. Have you been to the White House?
Maybe when I was a kid.
Well, look, we have some images of the early plans of the White House with the North Portico.
Wow.
Here, the floor plan here.
Wow.
Oh,
Here's
my
an
goodness.
early picture from the 19th century, an etching there.
And this part of the White House looks very much still the same.
That's right. When we think of the White House, we think of the North Portico as its defining feature. And you can see here, throughout history, right, important events have happened there. So here is the funeral of President Warren G. Harding in 1923. Here is President John F. Kennedy.
Wow.
And here, of course, is First Lady Michelle Obama and President Barack Obama on the North Portico.
This is what I thought about.
Why?
I mean, I'm going back to the moment when President Obama was first elected I was an undergraduate at Spelman College, and to know that I'm a descendant of someone who helped build the White House, where the first Black African-American president was, gives me goosebumps. And it's like something I would have never thought or imagined.
There are some mixed emotions with a revelation like this.
Mine are mixed as a historian, because my ancestors were also enslaved. And it makes me think that there's a larger history of the contributions of Black people to this country that are not well known and not widely acknowledged. And I'm proud, but also frustrated that often those people are disparaged as if they made no contribution, as if by virtue of being enslaved, they didn't count, as if by virtue of not being powerful people, they didn't matter. And they clearly did.
And Jackie, for you to know that he did this hard work, this back-breaking work with such little recognition, are you delighted that now more people are going to be aware?
Oh, yes. I'm definitely going to tell my family, because I'm looking at the names at the top. Patsy, that's two of my cousins' names.
Wow.
The names that's on here is like my cousins have these names.
Wow. And you didn't know, this is the first time you're seeing the tree like that, yet these names are passed down.
I'm just looking at the names. Family is like all in there, yes.
And there's more to Calvert. There's more to his story.
Coming up, Ashley and Jackie venture around Washington, D.C. to learn more details about their ancestor, Calvert.
It feels surreal. The fact that this is the original document, I almost don't want to touch it.
With a revelation like this, how were you able to find Ashley to make this happen?
We start with things like payroll records, and we just need to have focused time and attention on those records.
And those records are key. So the next day, Ashley and Jackie headed to the National Archives to meet up with Jesse Holland, a George Washington University professor.
Hi, I'm Jesse Holland.
Hi, Ashley. Hi, Jackie.
Inside this building, the most historically and legally significant documents in the country are preserved.
I've never been in here before.
It is an absolutely gorgeous building.
Holland is an author and expert on the untold history of enslaved labor in Washington, D.C.
I know you have a famous ancestor who helped work on the White House. In this box, we have the receipts. This is how we know enslaved African Americans were used in the construction of the White House. The government rented these slaves from their white slave masters. And here in this record, we can find a name that should look very familiar.
This 197-year-old document is the authentic handwritten government payroll from 1829, listing some of the men who worked on the construction of the White House.
So if we look down this side,
I see it.
Including their ancestor, Mr. Calvert Ambush, who worked a total of 36 days in the hot summer of 1829.
Calvert Ambush.
how much did they pay him? We see up here in this column that they have 75 cents, which was absolutely nothing.
Yep.
Because the money never went to the enslaved Africans, it went to their slave masters. You can actually see his name right here, William Carr. He was the owner of the enslaved worker, Calvert Ambush. How does it feel to see his name on this?
Surreal. The fact that this is the original document, I almost don't want to touch it. So.
Right.
And it's not just the White House. Professor Holland tells us enslaved labor was also used to build the United States Capitol, the very seat of democracy, including the iconic dome.
From the bottom floors all the way to the Statue of Freedom sitting on top, it would not be there without the blood, sweat, and tears of enslaved Africans.
In fact, between 1792 and 1829, more than 200 enslaved individuals helped build both structures, though experts believe it was many more.
It gives us a little bit of ownership of the president's house because it's written right here.
It's unbelievable.
Professor Holland took Ashley and Jackie around the Capitol.
This mall was nothing like we see today.
To help them envision what it looked like some 200 years ago. Back then, Washington, D.C. had become a hub of the domestic slave trade, a place where human beings were bought and sold in the shadow of the nation's most powerful institutions.
All of this was more of a slave market. There were slave markets over on Pennsylvania Avenue, and despite it being the nation's front yard, enslaved Africans were brought down to this area and were sold. One of the more famous places they had slave sales was over near the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. It's called Roby's Tavern.
Back in the day, slave pens and markets would have been seen on both sides of the National Mall. For enslaved laborers like Calvert Ambush, there were also no formal accommodations.
The slaves that were used in the construction of the White House, they of course didn't live in the White House. They lived right outside. All of the area you see behind us when they were constructing the U.S. Capitol, it was actual slave tent city.
Enslaved laborers split the stone at nearby quarries, transporting it upriver and towing it to Washington, where they built roofs, walls, and columns. This original sandstone block sits in the U.S. Capitol today.
This sandstone, while used for the U.S. Capitol, was also one of the main building blocks for the White House. It was enslaved Africans like your ancestor that put his hands on this.
I don't think I ever imagined the historical context and how his work, his hands had just a place in all of these buildings.
It's overwhelming just to know that it was tents all down this mall and look at it now.
Indeed, at the heart of the American story is a contradiction.
Thomas Jefferson penned the Declaration of Independence, saying that all men are created equal, and it was a lie. Thomas Jefferson owned slaves.
Jefferson wasn't alone. At least a dozen U.S. presidents owned enslaved people. One of them was a man named John Freeman, who was owned by Jefferson and later sold to President Madison, which brings us back to our descendants. We originally asked Ashley and Jackie to meet us at the Octagon House because a very important person in Calvert Ambush's story once lived here, his uncle, John Freeman. Professor Vince Brown took us to the basement where the original slave quarters from the 1800s are still intact.
Calvert Ambush's story doesn't end with slavery. He was freed. He was emancipated by another former slave named John Freeman, who was his uncle. And John Freeman lived in this house when James Madison was president, in this basement.
He had an uncle who freed him. That's a kind of caring family in your DNA.
Yeah.
The Bill of Sale and Deed of Trust records show that John Freeman took out a loan for $620 to buy his nephew's freedom.
And that was a lot of money. That was a lot of money.
Yeah.
So when you talk about family, taking care of family,
That's it.
people struggling right, to better their condition, this is that story.
And there's even more to Calvert's story. 10 Million Names researchers found a marriage license from 1834.
Calvert Ambush married, and Patsy cried. And they had 3 children, including Sarah, and that's what brings us to y'all.
Oh my goodness.
We're talking about people, you said they were once known. They're not the unknown.
They were once known by people who loved them, who cared for them.
Yeah.
And now we can know them again. And that's what this project is about.
After tracing the footsteps of their ancestor across the Capitol, Ashley and Jackie are now seeing the White House and its grand north portico for the first time.
Oh, wow.
Now that you've seen the record with your ancestor, Calvert Ambush, what does it feel like seeing the White House now?
Unreal. It feels unreal. I think just even looking at it and understanding more of the history behind it.
I have a special place in my heart right now about that building. I feel it right now. I got the chills. I won't walk past it again without stopping here thinking about him.
Down in Lafayette Square, there's a modest plaque that was placed near the White House in 2021, acknowledging that enslaved men helped build it. But it's easy to miss.
Is that enough? Should more be done so people know the true history of the White House?
Absolutely. I think now that we know names, and we can now put names to the enslaved African Americans, you can list those, right? And more so the fact that you have descendants who are alive today that are connected to those people. That is big.
We know the name, so now we want the name on there.
This has been an exciting day. Let's just breathe. I can't imagine if I walked into a place and they just were peppering me with not just your family history, but American history.
I feel famous. Never in a million years would I have thought that, one of my great, yes, fourth generation grandparents, had a role, right, in building the White House.
Jack, what are some of the first phone calls you're going to make when you get out of here?
Oh, I'm going to call my sister and tell her about it because she's really going to be shocked.
You're closer. It's like your great-great-great-grandfather.
Right.
Like just thinking about if you'd been able to tell your grandparents this information.
Wow.
What it would have meant to them.
A lot. Would have meant a lot.
What's the first thing you're going to tell your sons?
Guess what? It's going to be the first raise, And I'm going to just tell them about their fifth great-grandfather, what he did. I think finding out that you have a relative that has made an impact, that is important. And then being able to recognize his name, say his name,
Say his name right now.
Say his name, Calvert Ambush, It still gives me goosebumps. Knowing who I am as a person, we have similar connections, the fact that he built something, the fact that one of my degrees is in math, right, and I could have ended up in a career where I was building something.
He would be proud to meet you, both of you. He'd be proud. I got to tell you, I'll never forget Mrs. Obama making that speech.
I wake up every morning in a house that was built by slaves.
I've now found a missing puzzle piece to her speech. I now know one person who built the White House. That in itself is just, powerful.
Recently, I had a chance to let the Obamas know of our breakthrough discovery.
ABC News, we went on a journey to discover the names of those enslaved who helped build the White House. And we actually identified a man who helped build the North Portico and found living descendants. And we brought them back.
That's fantastic.
Together. What is it that you want people to truly understand about those who helped not only build the White House, but this country?
That, we're standing on everybody's shoulders to be here. The whole notion that there are people who are more deserving of being here and enjoying the freedoms of this country, that's just not true, and it's not fair. It's not accurate. There are a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds who have toiled and died and served to make this country what it is.
And expanding that narrative of America is exactly what the 10 Million Names Project hopes to accomplish.
One large goal of the 10 Million Names Project is to build a database of all of those names of people who were enslaved so that people can look up their family histories.
Their online ancestry database is accessible to the public. And in the coming years, their ultimate goal is to identify all 10 million people who were enslaved in North America, whose names have been lost to history.
We would like to, as best we can, find the names of all of them. And knowing their history, I think, helps us understand a much fuller picture of American society.
As Ashley and Jackie's journey to Washington, D.C. came to an end, they took a final stroll down the mall with Professor Holland.
I know the National Mall has been a place where we've seen some of the darkest parts of U.S. history, but there's also another side to that story. We have people like you who are finding their roots here in the American story.
This is the beginning. This is just the beginning.
While the atrocities of slavery in America can never be denied, it's also a story of resilience and survival, one that's unfolded right here on this very same mall.
As we move forward into the future, the National Mall also became a place of protest, where African Americans and their allies came to make America hold up to its promises of equality and freedom.
Where we had the I Have a Dream speech just on the other end of this National Mall.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Generation after generation, brave Americans demanding America live up to its promise from 1776.
This is not just a story of slavery. It's a story of hope, a story of overcoming adversity, a story of making America into what it always said it was. And it was people like your ancestors and people like you that helped this country live up to its ideals.
And I think that is important, and that is one of the key messages. Their hard work, their labor, their sacrifice was not in vain, you know. We are where we are today because of them.
We're not just part of the American story, we are the American story.
2.5 centuries later, the story is still unfolding.
I can see the pride that you have in wanting that history. So why is it important?
There's a piece of him that's inside of me. To understand whose blood is running through my veins, understand the connections that I have with them, you know, and how we got to where we are today, I think that is amazing.